Topic is 3.32 costs. We just need to go through some basics before we look at the nature of the mathematical relationships that are associated to it. Okay? So, to start off with, there is a difference between the idea of what we call a fixed cost and what we call a variable cost. What I'm going to annotate as FC and DC. What's the difference then, George? Fixed cost and a variable cost?
Fixed cost, it will stay the same regardless of the amount of output, and the variable cost will go up if output increases.
So, it remains the same regardless of output. Okay, whereas the variable cost will change directly with output. So just to point out at this stage in terms of kind of like an element of confusion that sometimes happens, if I think about my mobile phone for example, my monthly bill, if I've got like unlimited minutes, unlimited data, etc., I would argue is a fixed cost. Okay, because no matter how many phone calls I make, no matter how much internet usage there is or text messages that I send, it will be that same price every month. Okay? Then once a year, the mobile phone company will put the price of my bill up just because of what natural economic phenomenon? Inflation. Okay? Does that suddenly make it a variable cost? Because it's changed? No, because it has to be directly linked to
The
amount of output. Okay, so imagine that I had a set allowance of like data and then I went over that allowance. At that point, my internet usage would become a variable cost. But prior to that, it's the idea. So a variable cost is not one that changes because all costs can go up and down associated to things like inflation, but it has to be that direct link. So what are 3 examples of a fixed cost for a business then that you can think of?
Rent.
Rent.
Business rates.
Business rates. What are business rates? For those that might not have heard of it.
I don't know. It's just like, isn't it like when you have a shop and you have to
Yeah.
pay, it's like,
What have you got to pay the council for that they're going to provide for you as a service? What do they provide? So when we pay things to the council, like council tax on our houses, what are they doing for us?
all different things, like bins, like just.
And you have that. You'll have that for businesses, yeah? So in the high street you'll have lighting, you'll have bin collections, etc. Business rates are calculated as a percentage of the value of the property, not how much you necessarily sell. Similar with the idea of rent. What others?
Wages.
So this is a good one when we think about the idea of variable costs. If I think about something like salary or possibly wages, I can understand why you might argue that some examples of that are a fixed cost. So if you take, for example, my salary, well, if you added 5 other students in this room, my salary isn't going to change. It's not dependent on the amount of students. If I go into my Subway, the amount of Subways that get sold, the person that's working there, their wage is still going to be the same per hour, regardless. There are, however, situations where wages will be related to output. So, for example, if the number of students doing economics continued to rise, what might the school have to eventually do?
Another class.
Right, another class. And if they employ enough classes, we might need another teacher. So you could argue that things like total cost of labour could be considered variable because the more output that you produce, we know that labour is what type of demand? Derived. So at that point, then it could also be argued to be a variable cost. So it depends how it's presented. Anyone know what it's called when you get paid per unit of output?
Piece rate pay.
Yeah, excellent. So things like piece rate pay could also be another example. So there are, dependent upon the nature of it, variable costs that are linked to that. The main variable cost,
Cost of production.
what do you mean by that?
So, like your factors of production, like material.
Right, yeah, so materials, so stock, And then within manufacturing, things like,
Electricity bills.
say that again?
Phone bills. Like
Yeah.
electricity and
So
water.
like, yeah, energy and utility bills could be part of that process. Perfect. Right, other things that we just need to be aware of then. So, in terms of total cost, to calculate that, what have we got to add together?
Fixed and variable.
So, fixed cost plus total variable cost. How do we calculate total variable cost?
Variable cost times output.
So variable cost per unit times by output or quantity. Perfect. When we are then looking at the idea of average costs, how do we calculate average cost?
You just get your total cost and divide it by the amount of output.
Yeah. And remember what we said yesterday when we are looking at the idea of marginal cost. What does it mean when we say it in words?
One unit.
Yeah, perfect. Each additional unit, 1 unit. Because obviously a business is unlikely, like if you're a mass manufacturer, you're not going to make 1 unit at a time. So what will go at the top?
Change in cost.
So change in total cost divided by
Change in quantity.
change in quantity or output. Excellent. Okay, what I'm going to ask you to do next then, if you have a little look at that worksheet, okay, we're going to start to try and identify the relationships between it. So what I would like you to do is the bottom table, put those figures together and put it onto a graph paper. I want you to flip it over. I want you to then do the table here and then put that onto the graph paper. And then I want you to see if you can identify a relationship between those 2 graphs. So we're doing the bottom one and then we're doing the one over the top. If you get stuck, I've also put the formulas there on that sheet to help you as part of that process. Okay?
This table.